Hi guys, and welcome to something a little bit different. Now, barely a day goes by usually without someone asking about how to find regens and those sort of players in the game. Now, personally, I love those sort of players, and it's one of the things that makes the game really, really good for me. So I thought I'd do a little video, not on how you should do it, but how I do it. You know, this is not a, you should do it like this, or you should do it like that. I don't feel I'm in a position to be telling anyone how to do anything, but this is just how I do it. So I figured I'd do a little video to explain it. Now, I've gone into my Yortabor save, because I'm a little bit further in, and it makes more sense because there'd be more regens. I've deleted a load of my scouting assignments just to clear up some space to show you how to do this, guys, basically. I'm also going to run you through a couple of other methods, as well as give you some little tips that you can use here and there, but I'm just going to run you through how I set up my scouts to actually look for these players. Now, I usually go for hot prospect just because that usually just gives you a better idea of what kind of player you're actually looking for. It's just the one I use, although reports from regions can also, well, no, I mean, if you set the parameters right, you can make anything work, really. But hot prospect is what I use. If you're looking for specific positions, then obviously set that, but I generally don't because I'm just looking for good players. So we'll put the scouts requirements in. Now, I always set the current ability could literally be less than that, frankly, because it's irrelevant what they're like now. If you're looking for the future, then it doesn't matter what they're like now. Obviously, if they're better, that's great, but the point is it's best to get ones that are just the fact the lower the current ability, the cheaper you may even be able to get them for, in theory. Now, I always set the potential as well at 3 stars, not because it's the default. Sometimes 3.5 stars works as well, but 3 stars is generally okay because I find that if you set it too high, you'll miss out on a lot of players that could easily be as good as that, but sometimes the scouts don't get the actual predictions right. You know, you've got to be very careful with that. I generally ignore desirable attributes unless I'm looking for specific types of players, of course, yet again. Now, I'm always looking for transfer, and the budget stuff I leave how it is. Now, as for the age parameters, you want to set that to essentially, if you're looking for regens only, then you'll want to set that to the number of years in that you are. So if you're in the first year, you basically want to look for, I mean, it's difficult in the first year to find regens as it is because, of course, there's not been a proper youth intake yet. But the further you go into the game, the more you could potentially up this. Although, generally, I keep it to around about that because otherwise you just find older players and they'll be way too expensive. That's the reason I do it, because if you buy them at 15, they'll be much cheaper than they are at 19 once they've had a chance to develop and sign proper contracts. That's important as hell. So next up, instead of going to scouting range, now, if you've got a very limited scouting range, so say on Wimbledon I have just the UK and Ireland, I actually have my scouts set to look for the scouting range because there's only a few countries they can go to, so it makes sense to just set it like that. But if you've got worldwide scouting, which I do with Yortabor, as you will do with most top division sides in most nations, that with a decent amount of money. So what I do is I go to region, and then I'll pick regions that potentially we've got a bit of familiarity with. Now, as you can see, just in the blurred out picture, we've got a lot of ability in sort of South America as well as South Africa, or Southern Africa. Now, the reason for the South Africa link is because we actually have a club, we've got a link with Mamelodi Sundowns in Africa. That gives us a little bit of extra help there, but I found a lot of players in Nigeria as well in North Africa. Now, it will depend on what your scouts are like and what knowledge they have, but I've found a lot of success even with scouts that aren't that knowledgeable in those areas, so it can still be done, but obviously it's preferable if you get scouts with knowledge in each of those areas. So for the example here, I'm actually going to set it as Scandinavia, because of course we are a Swedish side, so it makes sense. Now, I generally put these as ongoing rather than just until finished, because if you've got enough scouts, for example, if you've only got one scout, then you want to keep bringing them back and going out to new regions if you've got that amount. But the thing is, if you're a top flight club like we are, we've got 10 scouts here. So I can send them out all to different regions and have them just sitting out there. And I can replace them if I need to, or change the contracts. Generally, I set priority as normal because I found that there's very little difference in switching between the two. And then you just hit start assignment and wait, basically. That's the first sort of little thing that I do to set up my scout reports. I actually just thought I'd add in a little section here. This is in post, about basically how you should actually then go about scouting once you've got the reports in. Because, of course, once you get the reports in, there'll be tons of them. And yeah, don't just accept that the best star rating is going to be the best player. Please don't do that. Actually take a look at the stats, that which you can see, and if you think they've got some standout abilities and there's not too many negatives about them, scout them further. I generally have a list of about 50 players before I actually get into this, and then I'll start narrowing it down as I send them. So I'll send a scout out to watch them for 3 games, and then I'll see a little bit more about them. If they've got any big negatives, I can get rid. If their potential isn't looking quite as great, I can get rid. And if their potential's grown, I can then add them to the top of my list. So then you'll eventually end up with a list of about 20 players. Then go out and fully scout them. Like, send them scout out for a month to watch them until you've got like 100% or near to 100% in scouting. Don't send them out again if it's like 97%. Don't worry about that. You shouldn't really be missing on anything fantastic at that point. Then start going after them, basically. At that point, you should have a list, and then you can prioritize the list. Now, I talked through this in a video a little while ago, but then just prioritize the list and go after the players. Now, the younger they are, generally the cheaper they are, but it will depend, of course, on the club's reputation. So, a player from Africa, a really good African centre-back, for example, from a club like ASEC in Tunisia, who are a really good side to look at if you're looking for those sort of players, will be a lot cheaper. You can generally pick those guys up for around about 2, 3, sometimes 4, £500,000. That's generally the sort of base level. A player of almost equivalent value in Germany Germany will cost you 10 to 15 million at that age, just to give you an idea. Now, of course, it does depend on the restrictions on foreign players in your league, but for example, if you're in France, a lot of the time, African players actually count as EU players and are not counted as foreign nationals, and thus can play for you, which is why on Paris, with my Paris save, I was able to get a lot of those good players straight in very quickly. So I hope that little tidbit helps. I just wanted to show you guys a quick example of one of the players that I actually picked up. Now, of course, he's not joining us yet. As you can see, he doesn't join us until literally over a year away. Oh no, 6 months. That's looking awesome. But the point is, I actually signed this lad ages ago, like genuinely ages ago. I think it was actually in my second season we signed this guy. But the point is, if you get in there early, you can get them cheap. Now, look at my sort of future transfers. We've got transfers going all the way out the window, but this is Ed Air. This is the one I'm really interested in because he's a striker and an attacking midfielder, and he looks bloody amazing. And we picked him up for, I think it was like 2 million up front and another million in behind. So that's not a lot of money for what looks like an incredibly good striker. These are the sort of players you can pick up on the cheap if you get them early enough and you look specifically for the 16, 17, even 15-year-olds. Sometimes in Germany you can pick up 14-year-olds, although, however, that can be a little bit more difficult because German clubs generally ask for a lot more money than a Brazilian side will, so just bear that in mind. Something else I wanted to show you guys is another sort of method that I know a lot of people do use as well. Now, this is great, but you can sometimes get a little bit too deep into it. So basically, if you do Control W on the screen, it'll bring up this world transfers, basically. Then if you bring the drop down up and you go to youth intake, it will show you, like, on a monthly basis, youth intakes from those clubs, basically. Now, of course, it depends what leagues you've got turned on. Now, I've got a fair amount of leagues turned on in this save. So as you can see, there's a load of Turkish clubs here. Now, it's obviously difficult because you can't see anything here. Yeah, okay, you can click on that and see their value, and that will give you some idea. Maybe. But then remember, value does depend a lot on the club's reputation rather than the player's value itself. However, if you have a little bit of knowledge on what clubs generally produce decent players, then, for example, Galatasaray are generally pretty good at producing players. So if you take a little look, he's worth £500, he's worth £375, not fantastic. But look, that guy there, suddenly where's he gone? There he is. £46,000, so clearly he might have something about him. You can't see much about him, of course, but my point is, if you want to go through and have a look at those, go and pick some of those players out too and send some scouts out to try and scout them. Of course, it does rely on a little bit of knowledge about what's good countries to go to and all that sort of stuff, but my point is, if you want to take a little bit of a cheat, not a cheat, obviously, because it's in the game, it's there for you to use, so that's another way that you can find good regions. I haven't really done that. I did that a little bit with Pompey once we were in the Premier League, and I believe I actually found Tony Ivancic using that method. I can't remember if that's true or not, but there you go. That's another method you can use. The final method that I've heard is work, and I literally don't do this myself, but I know that it does work from talking to other people, and that is scouting youth international tournaments. Now, again, you'll need worldwide scouting, I believe, to do that, but just look at, like, scout the international youth teams of national countries, basically, because think about it, if they're good enough to play for those teams, it stands to reason that they've probably got a decent bit of potential, or at least a decent amount of current ability. I know for a fact that a lot of my players that I bring in, these youngsters, generally get call-ups to the under-18s and under-21s, and I don't know if some countries have different levels other than those two. I believe, like Brazil, I believe there's an under-17, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, look in those potentially. You can find some decent players. It's not something I do, but you can scout competitions. So if you go to report from a competition, and you can select those sort of competitions, so we go to international, look at these, under-21 qualifiers, African under-21 nations qualifiers. There's all kinds of French youth invitational. All these sort of tournaments can be scouted. And if you've got decent scouts for those sort of nations, or just with decent knowledge, then you might be able to pick up some absolute bargains in those ones as well from slightly smaller clubs. It's also just worth bearing in mind, however, that if you start the game, there's an option to add players to playable teams. So that means if a team does not have a full roster of real players, regens will be added to them. Now, those regens could be of any age, so just bear that in mind. So I've had players that have appeared in my scouting reports that are like 23 in the first season and are regens because of that very reason. It rarely happens that you'll find something like that, particularly not in the first few seasons of the game, because generally those are added to teams that aren't particularly great anyway, and thus they don't have the full squad generated by the actual game itself. The final thing to look out for, now those of you that watched my Portsmouth save last year will remember a player called Luigi Lucarelli. Now, he was a very special type of regen. There was two of them. I think there was another one called Carmine Spina, but I got them both at the same time. Now, I don't know where they came from, and I actually talked to people about this, and apparently this is something that happens in FM sometimes. Sometimes regens will just appear on the free agent list. They won't have any history of any clubs before them, and sometimes, in the case of Luigi Lucarelli, they can be bloody amazing, and because they've got no club history, you can get them on really cheap contracts, and they're decent already. I think we sold Lucarelli to Watford for like £26 million or something. Ridiculous. No, it was Arsenal, wasn't it, what we're talking about? But my point is, those sort of players, keep an eye out for them. If you see a player that looks older than the regen age or whatever, or that you'd think it'd be, and they've got decent stats, go and check them out, because the chances are they could be one of those special ones. If you pick one of those up, they are like shiny they're like shiny Gyarados of Football Manager. So yeah, just bear that in mind as well. I hope this has been useful to you guys. I don't know if it is, but like I said, it's what I do rather than what you should do, but there's just some little things in there that I hope have been important and will help you with your saves in any way that you can. Of course, if you do have any questions about anything to do with this video, then please do drop them in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. And if you have enjoyed this, please do drop a like on the video as well. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. That would be awesome. And yeah, I hope to do some more videos like this on little things, but I don't want to do too much in terms of tutorials because I don't really feel that I'm in a position to be lecturing anyone about anything. So guys, I will see you in one of my other videos. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.